as a teacher. Was engaged at UCLA in a number of programs related to science education and increasing the number of students with represented backgrounds to go into scientific careers. And then ultimately, the past 16 years, I've been with the Amgen Foundation, which has made a firm commitment to strengthening scientific literacy and to inspiring more students to go into scientific careers. And so it's been a wonderful passion that's brought me together. I think you asked about my personal journeys. I went on for a doctorate in education after my undergraduate degree, and in this role, I'm able to really excite more folks. We used to talk about hundreds or thousands, and now with some of the virtual initiatives, we're able to talk about millions that are getting excited about science. Pass it back to you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with, I think my own personal interest in science started fairly early on. Shout out to my mother, who retired not that long ago as a public elementary school teacher, who herself has always been very passionate about science. And I think she really wanted to expose my brother and me to science as a discipline. One summer when I was in middle school, my father happened to be taking classes at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole in Massachusetts. And while he was in class all day, she would take my brother and me to just visit some of the laboratories and speak with the professors. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever that people could have a job where they got to ask interesting questions and then try to run experiments to answer those questions. And I think that really sparked an interest in science that I've followed in one direction or another ever since. Probably the most impactful teacher I've ever had in my career, that includes K-12, an undergrad degree at Harvard and a PhD from Cal, was actually my freshman biology teacher. He expected the world of us. In fact, he used a college textbook in our course, which was definitely not what the state of Texas wanted him to be using. And he really, really pushed us to think outside the box and to ask creative questions. And I know that everything I learned from him impacted what I do today.
Thank you, Jens.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I was always also like Rachel. I was always very, very curious. I love to read and learn about how the world works, and also similar to Rachel, actually, my mom, I think, played a role in it, because she really fostered that curiosity. And I remember many trips to the public library when I was very, very young, and bringing home like stacks of books about all kinds of topics and disciplines. So I was really quite broadly interested, and a lot of also educators, I think, played a role in that, in stimulating that. When I got to 10th grade, I actually decided that I wanted to do biotech, and this was based on watching a documentary about biotech, and starting with the history, some history of Paul Ehrlich's magic bullet theory of monoclonal antibodies, and where I realized that not only is modern biology and how nature works extremely beautiful, but by understanding it, and you can actually then also apply not just science but also engineering to leverage that and actually help patients and help people. And that's something that I always was very passionate about. So that brought me to life science. So I grew up in Germany. I'm a very firm believer in the public school system, because I've seen that can actually work quite well, and also free education. And when I went to college, decided then, like I said, to study biotechnology. Also because, when you think of innovation, that usually happens at the intersection of disciplines that are seemingly unrelated. So in this case, modern biology and engineering. Did my PhD in that area, in mammalian cell culture, also already geared towards making new medicines for patients. Part of that in Germany, part of that at UBC Vancouver in the Michael Smith lab, which was my first international experience, which also was very formative to me, because I came to Vancouver, and we were about 20 people in that lab from 17 different cultural backgrounds, which was extremely inspiring, that diversity. Then I worked in Britain in a British biotech company, smaller biotech company, and then came to the US 20 years ago. And this is home for me now. When I think about educators that maybe had the most impact on me, I think, one of my biology teachers comes to mind, because what he did is he created this lab class, which was incredibly formative for me, because it wasn't just cooking based on a cooking recipe, but he designed it in a way that we really had to come up with our own ideas and our own experiments, and basically got us to experience the joy of discovery. And so that had a big influence on me.
Great. And so Jens and Rachel, you both have obviously the science education, the science background, but at what point did you decide to pursue a leadership role? And how did you go about acquiring those business skills? Rachel,
I was actually very lucky. When I was a graduate student at UC Berkeley, the business school at the time was offering the opportunity for PhD students to cross-register and take nearly any of the MBA courses. And so I already had an eye to wanting to be on the industry side of science, didn't exactly know what that meant or how to get there, but was pretty sure there was a vocabulary I was missing to do that. And so I took as many MBA courses as I could fit in the last couple of years of my time at Cal. And it helped tremendously. It gave me the skill set to read financial statements from a company. And it was a lot of fun because it was largely pretty practical coursework. My favorite class was taught by a venture capitalist who took the entire semester to help us create fake companies and build the pitch. And by the end of the semester, we were pitching to a panel of judges, our new company, trying to raise fake money for the fake companies. Fairly shortly thereafter, I found myself pitching real venture capitalists trying to get real money. So that was incredibly helpful.
Fantastic. Jens, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, one really interesting learning when I went into industry was that sort of what the difference is between ideation and true innovation. And innovation meaning, making it real, right? And when I realized that, science by itself, I mean, that's great. And having the right answers is great. But ultimately, to make it real, it's all about people. It's all about people. It's all about being able to work with people, to influence, to inspire, to also really have empathy, because it's not always just about having the right answers. And people do have different perspectives, and you do need to do some active listening. So more and more I became interested in leadership, because again, to make it real, you have to really, you can't do it on your own, even if you have all the right science behind you. And so that's, when I became more and more fascinated in working with people, leading larger, diverse teams, building organizations, and so on. The business aspects for me, were also always very, very interesting, because for me, I like I said earlier, I decided early on that I also wanted to do something really applied. So that came natural. But also I, like Rachel, I certainly did a lot of, learning also while already working, because I started as a scientist. And so I also did some Harvard programs on the business side and so on, which is, very helpful.
Thank you. So with the disruption caused by the pandemic, many students at all levels missed out on opportunities for in-person hands-on lab experiences and training. How important is it for K-12 students, or really any student, to participate in hands-on lab experiences? And Scott, let's start with you. We know Amgen is doing incredible work to help students develop lab skills and explore STEM careers through a free online platform. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, and we see those hands-on experiences as critical. I think going to something Jen said earlier about cookbook, you really want students to understand the authentic nature of the scientific process, take failure and taking 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. And so the question becomes, how do you do that online? And I'm proud to say we partnered with Harvard since 2016, actually, to develop a platform that's called Lab Exchange. That's the word lab, the letter X, the word change.org. It's a free virtual platform that is set up for science learning. It's set up for sharing, it's set up for collaboration. But on there, we've developed a number of simulations that are built by an ed tech company in South Africa, actually, that really get at how to authentically engage in scientific techniques. You can go on there and run a gel, you can do a number of things, but your actions in those simulations are going to determine the results you ultimately get, just like if you were in a real lab. And that platform and the way it allows for personalization, in other words, a 10th grade biology teacher in Ireland can teach her students gel electrophoresis differently than a college professor in Puerto Rico, than someone that's tutoring their cousin, in a different country. That ability to authentically engage in science is what has led us in the past about 15 months. We went from a few users to 8 million users as of this week. And it's something that we're proud of, and we see, we don't see technology in any way replacing hands-on labs. The idea is, how can we complement hands-on labs? How can we create the best possible blended experience so that when we get everyone back to school, my daughter's going to high school in the other room right now, but when everyone gets to go back to school, how do you take technology and platforms like that, and Khan Academy and other platforms we're proud to support, and complement what is happening in the classroom so that students can authentically understand what science is, have a deeper appreciation for the role science plays in our lives, and ultimately, especially if they can see folks that look like them in science, can consider science as a career.
Thank you, Scott. Rachel, what about you? How important is it for K-12 students to participate in hands-on lab experiences? And what do you think about students learning lab skills through virtual simulations?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important for students to have the opportunity to engage with science, but I think that engagement can be as informal as you want it to be, right? I don't think it has to be a fancy laboratory that has incredible equipment and pipettes and all kinds of things. I certainly didn't have anything like that at the school that I went to as a student. I think engaging productively is about being taught to have the confidence to ask a question, right? Asking questions is hard. Having the guts to stand up and say, I don't think we know the answer to this. Here's how I want to frame the problem and how I think I might be able to design an experiment to answer it. And then just the experience of going through that, whether it's in a virtual environment or a home brewed something you do on the dining room table, which is definitely what I did in high school. Any of those, I think, expose you to the scientific method and to scientific thinking, and they're all equally valuable.
Thank you. Jens?
Yeah, I
What are your
couldn't agree
thoughts?
more. I couldn't agree more. I think there's really not that much to add. I mean, hands-on learning, hands-on experiments, is I think a crucial part of a science education and of inspiring kids. It doesn't need to be that fancy. It doesn't need to be expensive equipment. I think Rachel is spot on. And sometimes, actually, with my own kids, I have twin daughters. They're now 15, and when they were younger, I remember some science projects that we did at home with very, very simple ways. I mean, it's really about getting the kids to make connections, to think, to use their analytical skills and develop their analytical skills, and then a little bit, a joy of discovery, and which you can achieve with relatively simple means. One thing I am proud of is, by the way, we are sponsoring science kits for Berkeley elementary schools, so that basically, especially in the pandemic, I think that can be helpful. So have at least some equipment, so to speak, very simple at home that they can use to do experiments. But in the absence of that, I mean, virtual, yes, absolutely, these virtual platforms can be very useful indeed. So fully supported as well.
Great. So all of your companies are at the forefront of innovation. And in our audience, we have educators at the K-12 level and the community colleges at the university level. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, what are some of the emerging skills that are important to be successful in your field or at your company? And I'm interested in learning both about some of the hard technical skills and also some of the soft skills. Some of you have already touched upon them, but let's go with Rachel.
Yeah, I'd say the most important skill for almost any position that we hire for is the ability to collaborate and work in a team. Yeah, it might sound really simple, but the work that we do, the work that so many biotech and pharma companies do is so complicated. There's no way one person can stand in the corner and do something on their own. And so success really relies on teamwork. And so people who come in with those soft skills and are able to work with others and maybe work with others who aren't the same as them, who come from different backgrounds and have different skill sets is absolutely critical. I think the next piece is piggybacking off of what Jens just mentioned. It's analytical thinking, right? A lot of the science that we're doing is so cutting edge. There are no kids who have been trained on this in schools, right? It doesn't exist. I can't hire someone who has that expertise. So we need people who are smart and adaptable and willing to learn on the fly. And so really kind of comfortable with coming into an environment where they know their first job is to learn.
Thank you, Jens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really appreciate what Rachel said, you know, the importance of really teamwork, right? Because, and this has to be taken into account when teaching kids. Because no matter what exactly the role is in any of our companies, indeed, you know, you need diverse cross-functional teams with, you know, people that come from different backgrounds, with different strengths, different weaknesses, and only together as a team can they actually be successful. So basically teaching children to basically understand also and value different experiences, different strengths, and how they can work together to then leverage the strengths and compensate for the weaknesses to achieve a common goal. I think that's crucial, and it does take communication skills, but not just the talking, not just the eloquently bringing your point across, but also really the listening as well. Now, of course, analytical skills, yes, diligence, I mean, at the end of the day is really important for everything we do, especially when we produce medicines for patients, where it's all about safety and quality of the products, because they get injected into actually people, somebody's mother, brother, father. And so you need people that are very, very diligent in how they execute and do their work. And then, you know, instilling in kids a passion to make a difference, in our case in life science, to really help patients, because that's why we are doing all of that. I think it can be very inspiring to children, and so it's good to make these connections as well.
Thank you. And Scott, from your perspective, what's important from both the Amgen and the Amgen Foundation perspective?
Sure, and I'm going to repeat some of what my colleagues said. You know, there was a lot of discussion around the 4 C's, really, when you think about education, you know, creativity, collaboration, communication, and I think what was used was analytical thinking, but I'll say critical thinking as a way to remember that. All of those, by the way, are built, you know, Amgen has a social architecture that has a number of values that define us as a company, and work in teams and being science-based and communicating, collaborating, and being accountable, all of that is right in there, and that's necessary to be successful. I think the one thing I would add that's maybe new or from that perhaps hasn't been said yet is adaptability. You know, today, if you're trying to figure out, you know, what career to prepare for 10 years from now or 20 years from now, you know, you can go back over time and half the careers don't exist. And, you know, there's all kinds of conferences about the future of work and where we're going. So I think that, you know, from an educator perspective, everything that was mentioned is important, but being adaptable, knowing that change is the one constant, knowing that learning is not just about when you were in K-12 or back at university, but you always have to learn, whether you're at Bayer or Caribou or Amgen. We need, we're entering a time where, you know, lifelong learning is where it's at. And whether you're the teacher, the scientist, or the student, you have to be adaptable and willing to learn. And I think that's the only way, not only will our companies be successful, but the only way we will be successful as a society, in more of a continuous learning mindset, I guess is the way I'd put it.
Thank you all. And I'm sure a lot of members in the audience want to know about the next question. So, is your company participating in any formal partnerships with educational institutions or organizations? And that can look like in the matter of guest speakers, company tours, internships, guest lecturing projects, any of those opportunities. Let's start with Jens.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. So for example, one partnership that we have for many years is with biotech partners. And through biotech partners, we basically engage with underrepresented students. So we have something around 15 to 20 high school and community college students on campus every year in paid internships of varying lengths. They're shorter for high school students and longer for community college interns. And so that's something that I've also really participated in early on in my career. So when I came to the US in 2000, I also myself acted as a mentor for some of these biotech partner students, and that was actually a very powerful experience also for myself, because it's just so satisfying to basically you know, show a young person, young talented individual, that they can have a career in biotech, and you know what their options are. And then a lot of these students then actually end up working in various roles and they at the Berkeley site, or then move on to other biotech companies. But we have quite a few alumni of this program. Then we also partner with Berkeley Community Scholars. And so this is really an opportunity for our scientists also to be mentors to students in the community. And one of the really nice things there, by the way, is that because our diversity is so high, and I really believe that's part of our success in many of the areas that we work in. So we have about 70% people of color at the Berkeley campus. We have about 1,000 people there. And so students that connect with mentors through this program, there's a good chance that basically they will actually connect with a mentor who looks like them, no matter where they come from or what their background is. So those are two of the programs that we have and that we leverage.
Fantastic, thank you. Rachel, you're a smaller company with about 65 people. So what does that look like for your company?
Yeah, so we've been around for just shy of 9 years, and every year we've taken at least one intern. Some summers we have 5 or 6 interns. These are typically college students, master's students, or PhD students, and they're paid internships for a few months. We love it. It's a great way to get people with, you know, cutting edge new ideas and skills in. I hope it's interesting and fun for them as well to be exposed to what biotech looks like as they're exploring their own career options. We're nowhere near as well organized as obviously either Amgen or Bayer in terms of what we can do in the community, but we try to do a lot. And we have historically a number of times hosted classes, K-12 classes or local college classes on our site in Berkeley, giving them tours, giving them access to our team to get a sense for what working at Caribou would look like, as well as folks from our team go into the community and speak at schools, whether that's K-12 schools, community colleges, or some of the local universities. So we try to get really engaged.
Thank you. And Scott?
Sure, and let me first say we're a proud supporter of biotech partners for many years in the Bay Area, and I think this is you know, we all need to be in this together. I think the biopharmaceutical industry is committed to STEM education, and we're proud to be part of that. On the Amgen Foundation side, the company has made a deep commitment. We've committed $200 million to advancing science education in our communities and beyond. One of the biggest programs at the high school level is called the Amgen Biotech Experience. 22 sites around the world where we bring biotechnology into classrooms. Very proud up in the Bay Area to partner with the Lawrence Hall of Science at Berkeley. And we have different partners in every region where we partner with universities to train teachers and bring biotechnology experiments right into students' hands. We partner with 24 universities to create undergraduate research experiences. So students can go spend the summer at Harvard or overseas at Cambridge or at Stanford, and we essentially pay for that and provide those types of opportunities. And then on the virtual front, where we've been the biology partner of Khan Academy for 6 to 7 years now. So proud to partner with them and these free platforms that now have so much content in science. And then I mentioned Lab Exchange earlier. So through, in that case, a $13 million investment, we've built a platform that we think that our entire industry and teachers can use to engage students in science. I want to mention that, you know, we live in a country where not everybody, in a world that not everyone has a chance to do science. You know, it can be expensive, or it can be for the, you know, the fancy private schools. We are focused, and I know many of our colleagues at other companies are focused on making sure that everyone has a chance to engage in science, and that we are not leaving so much talent on the sidelines. And I think so these efforts with biotech partners and with other organizations, Khan Academy and elsewhere, are just integral, because talent on the sidelines from a biopharmaceutical perspective is medicines on the sidelines that aren't being invented because we haven't harnessed the diversity of talent in this nation and beyond. So excited that we have a commitment and that our industry has such a commitment to this space.
Thank you. With many educators in the audience, from your perspectives, what are the most important things educators can do to help students prepare for a career in the life sciences? Let's start with Jens.
Well, definitely foster their curiosity, teach kids to make connections between disciplines. So, I mean, we talked about a couple of different things earlier, but you know, when I think back of my school years and high school years, it was still sort of rather segregated in a way that the way science subjects were taught. So there was biology, there was chemistry, there was physics. Then, okay, organic chemistry kind of interfaced a little bit with biology and biochemistry, but it was still sort of kept separate. I think when you look at where innovation happens, and I think I might have mentioned that earlier, real innovation always happens at the intersection between seemingly unrelated disciplines. So basically teaching kids across disciplines how basically biology and data science and physics and engineering, how it all can come together, and you know, then basically you educate a new generation of inventors that can really change the world. So this is something that, you know, would be my wish to all the educators out there, to emphasize that even more so than it has been in the past.
Rachel?
I think educators have a real opportunity to help students understand that careers are rarely linear, right? If you look at any of us, I don't think we would have guessed as high school students that this is where we'd be today, nor the path that we took to get here would be the path that got us here. You know, I think especially thinking back on my own experience, K to 12, and then certainly the 4 years of college after that, it seemed like a really clear path and I knew exactly what I needed to do and where to go. And then all of a sudden, very confusing that it wasn't obvious what was next. And so I think helping to really normalize that passion and interest is an important North Star. And that if you follow that, it will open up opportunities that many of these students don't even know exist. And probably 15, 20 years from now, they're going to be in careers that don't even exist today. And so I think being open to opportunity is critical.
Thank you. And Scott?
I guess I would answer it in two ways. One, I think it was just said, but you know, how can students see themselves in science? It's great to, you know, understand a technique or to read something, but you need to see folks that look like you in science. And what is the best way to go about that, making sure that students can identify as a scientist? You can't see yourself in a field, whatever field, you're unlikely to think it's for you, you're unlikely to pursue that. And then the second point I made, I guess, is, as we think about how to instill a love of science in students, is just, we all learn differently. Some of us are more auditory learners, visual, kinesthetic, if I remember correctly, as folks that learn by doing. And so everyone, there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that will work. I mean, if I had seen the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, on Mars way back when, I probably would have wanted to be a botanist, right? And yet obviously not every educator is just going to go make a Hollywood movie. But a book example, Bill Bryson, the comedian, wrote a book, The Short History of Nearly Everything. The book was fascinating about science, but it was also fascinating because it was funny. Humor in that case was effective. And so, the movies and books and interactive simulations like we have on some of these websites, hands-on science, someone like Rachel coming to your classroom and speaking about how she got to be where there's so many different ways to do it. And I guess we just have to recognize the diversity of folks out there. It's not one way that's going to work. Similar to our companies, Amgen, we have peptibodies and monoclonal antibodies and small molecules, and there's many different ways to go after a particular target. We need to be thinking the same way as we think about exciting kids about STEM and about science, and we cannot think in terms of like one way is the answer for everybody.
Great, and one more question on my part before I open it up for the Q&A questions is, you may not have imagined yourself in the role that you are today, but what is one thing you wish you would have known in high school to prepare for a career in the life sciences? And let's go with Scott.
Well, I'm going to borrow a page from one of our scientists that was asked this question, because I think it's a great response. In high school, she asked one of her teachers a question, and the teacher said back to her, we don't know, or I don't know. And she said, what do you mean you don't know? And he said, we don't understand that yet. And for that scientist, and this was 40 years later that she was speaking after a lifetime in science, she didn't realize up to that point that there were things we didn't understand, that we didn't know. Like she thought it was all in the book, or someone knew it. And I think that, for some students, for some young people, just understanding how much it is we don't know, the brain, for instance, and how much of that we understand and how much of that we have no idea how things are working. I think that can be a real motivating factor for folks to recognize we've come a long way, but there is such a long way to go. In high school, I'm going to answer for her, knowing that there was so much we didn't know inspired her into a career and a lifetime in science. She's never looked.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, that was an awesome answer. I'll give maybe a slightly more technically specific one. I wish I had anticipated how important programming could be in the life sciences. I thought of science and biology as being, molecular biology or cell biology or biochemistry. But as we've heard from Jens today, those lines have blurred so substantially. There aren't these independent disciplines anymore. And I think a key thread that runs throughout so much of the life sciences today is the ability to analyze huge data sets. And so I wish I had computer programming skills. I'm certainly jealous of my many colleagues who do.
Thank you. Jens?
I think for me, definitely, it would have been great to have understood earlier in high school the importance of soft skills, the importance of active listening and empathy, because again, I was very focused on science from a young age on, and I really thought naively that it is about having all the right answers and having the right science behind you. And then you go into industry and you are sitting in a meeting and you're showing your presentation, and it's so clear what we have to do, right? Because this is the science. And suddenly you realize that there are 2 or 3 people that just don't agree with you. And then you start to explain it again, just slower, or try to explain it better. And they still don't agree with you. And of course, they understand perfectly where you're coming from, but there are other motivators that prevent them to follow that path. fears, concerns, and a lot of other human factors. And so this human element, this is something that, again, I had to learn then in the real world, that this is at least as important as the science to ultimately make it real and make a difference.
Thank you. And I have just a few quick questions before we wrap up here so that we can end on time. The first question is for Jens. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the German advanced apprenticeship model. Interested to see what your thoughts are on the German biotech apprenticeship model and utility for these programs, and how some of that model could be replicated here in California. Of course, knowing that there are different regulations and employment laws.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that?
No, that is actually a very, very good point, because of course in Germany, amongst some other European countries like Switzerland and so on, the apprenticeship model has been very successful for centuries, literally, right? I mean, basically since the guilds of the Middle Ages. And now, of course, you see that in many disciplines. So in biotech, and I did work also in 14, 15, 16, for example, then back in Germany again. And when you are, especially in the manufacturing sectors, which I am also here now, where it's really about making products on a larger scale, the apprenticeship model really makes a lot of sense. So you basically have then apprentices that basically come from high school and then work in the company for 3 years usually. They do go to school as well during that time, but it's really more practically oriented, not as theoretical, maybe as college. And then they really learn the ins and outs. And so for everybody's different, right? So for children and young people that are maybe not so much interested in going into the scientific depths, but they still want to do something technical, they want to do something practical, something hands-on. This provides very, very good careers. And again, you know, as a matter of fact, in the US, when I came to the US, I realized that this is missing. So this is something that we as an industry, honestly, in biotech, try to build a little bit. I mean, not quite apprenticeship, but when we work together with community colleges, for example, that almost follows that model a little bit, where we actually have then students come in, I mean, that maybe at some of the community colleges are in a biotech program, and then they basically work with us in a paid internship. So it's at least conceptually a bit closer to this apprenticeship model. Yeah.
Thank you. And final question for Rachel. Do you have any advice for graduating students who have a degree in science or STEM, but maybe don't have the industry experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think getting that first job is always the hardest, right? You read every job spec and it says, you know, 2 to 5 years of industry experience required. Probably first and foremost, I would remind people, whenever you're looking at a job opportunity, the laundry list there is the wish list. And typically companies are willing to give on some of those wishes. And so if you have a lot of the other skills and expertise, you don't have to tick every single box to be confident enough to submit your resume. I would certainly encourage people to look at internships. There should be plenty of paid internships as the world starts to reopen a bit, and that becomes more doable again as a great way to get your feet wet in an organization. And, you know, play to your strengths. Coming out of college, typically you have some great laboratory skills and can use those quite directly on day one as a research associate or in another similar position in an organization. And that's a great way to then move into other roles within the company.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. That concludes our fireside chat. Thank you to our amazing panelists, all of our symposium presenters, our sponsors, and last but not least, my incredible Biocom Institute team. Well, we welcome everyone who stick around for the networking sessions. You will be directed to Zoom for the networking sessions in a moment. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.